Hey friends, how's it going? How's it hanging? How you holding up? Um, Things seem to be a considerable shift. The last few weeks, for me at least, there's been some interesting movement, interesting manifesting, interesting. And not to just kind of reduce it through new age platitudes or um, spiritual jargon, but I've really been reconnecting to the magic of life lately and remembering that miracles can happen when you least expect it. And what is a miracle? But it's a shift from fear to love. And I don't even like Marianne Williamson, to be honest with you. I find her very triggering, but it is a good perspective. A miracle is a shift from fear to love. So let's shift from fear to love and continue to shift into love, no matter how strange the times may be. So, yeah, thinking about like shifting into miracles and remembering magic, I'm really psyched to share this conversation today with my dear friend Devin Person, who is a real life wonderful wizard of uh, things that are delightfully odd, like the Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the Wonderful Wizard of the Odd, maybe. I hope he likes that. But Devin rules. He and I connected a few years ago through our mutual friends, Sean and Cass, who have the Very Ape podcast, and are two of my like closest homies back in New York. Actually, the last time I saw Devin, we went to see Spangle in concert about a year ago, and it was like I'm pretty sure I had coronavirus because right after that I got sick for a month. I couldn't leave the bed. Lots of weird shit started happening. But Devin is a delight to be around and to conversate with, and this conversation is really good. I don't know if it's just going to leave you feeling warm and fuzzy inside, but it's real. It's honest. It's silly. It's absurd. It's kind of like the times that we're in. So, funny enough, we had meant to record the podcast the day prior, but the internet went out in Devin's neighborhood, which was so strange. Of all the times we could have picked, the internet went out. But the podcast conversation that could have happened then didn't happen, so this one did. So it was meant to be exactly what it was. And I recently revisited the Lord of the Rings films. Namely, I actually really like the Hobbit cartoon. Like, I really wish that the Rankin Bass cartoons would come back because those are my favorite. But, you know, Gandalf says, like, a wizard's never late. A wizard arrives exactly when they intend to. So this podcast is a wizard. It's not late. It's arriving exactly as it intended to. And I'm really, really happy with the flow that happened here. So a little bit about Devin. Devin's website is personisawake.com. So how does he describe himself? So a professional wizard. What does that mean? Merlin, Gandalf, Dumbledore, Devin Person. Devin says, I'm a humble 21st century incarnation of the wizard archetype, playfully blurring the line between fantasy and reality. Wizards are helpful guides who bring magic, mystery, wisdom, and hope to their societies in which they serve. As a modern wizard, my life's work is to help you, yes, specifically you, create a slightly better reality. Using thought to change reality is nothing new. From mindfulness meditation to the placebo effect, we know mental actions can produce real-world benefits. What makes wizardry different from positive thinking, self-help, and other forms of spirituality is its focus on small actions. In an era of endless content and constant overwhelm, the wizard asks, what's the least you can do? So what does a wizard do? Whatever they want. As an undefined archetype with no centralized governing body, each wizard can be what they wish to be. For me, this manifests as playing with reality and helping people to discover the magic within them. To make the world a more magical place, here are a few things I do as a wizard. So Devin says he rides New York City subway system in full wizard robes, granting wishes to commuters, hosts events, leads immersive magic rituals, guided meditations, and perform hypnosis. Clearly, this is pre-COVID times. Create onboarding wizards for major tech companies to help them guide new users through complex processes, work one-on-one with individuals looking to create magical change in their own life, and interview guests on my participatory digital ritual, This Podcast is a Ritual, which I am very grateful to have been a guest on. That link will be in show notes, along with some other great links of Devin's, including his wonderful New York Times article. So it's a little bit about Devin. We talk more about how he became a wizard on this episode. To learn more about Devin, please visit personisawake.com. Person is awake on socials. This podcast is a ritual. So let's get magical and weird. Kick back, relax, enjoy, and here we go. Welcome to Radio Amenti, embracing the eternal now, where minds and timelines merge, inspiring synchronicity, awakening potential, and making sense of change. Okay, so third time is a charm here.
See, this is what happens when you try and deal with wizards. Everything goes haywire. It somehow works out in the end, but whew, you never know the way it was up.
Some strong magic is afoot.
Indeed, yeah. And I mean, again, I was in the middle of saying this when we got cut off for a second time, but the conversation that we're having now is not the same as the conversation we would have had yesterday if my internet had gone out, or we would have had 2 minutes ago if your microphone hadn't shut off randomly.
Yeah, so I mean, it's an ever evolving, fluid conversation happening here. And it seems kind of appropriate for, I think, what we want to talk about, which is kind of like obstacle being the way, and
Hmm.
maybe kind of like the divine art of surrender through this fucking crazy time we're in.
Well, I think, there's so many people that talk about being like intuitive and in touch, and then they run into one of these log jams and then they just bash their head up against it. And it's sometimes nice to go like, oh, okay, maybe this is a fun opportunity for a detour.
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes the right way is, or the wrong way is the right way. It's like
Oh, the wrong way feels so right.
I love like Labyrinth is one of my favorite movies. It's like
Mm.
the best for me, like David Bowie, and that was like my first love, forever love. And I mean, so much of that film is about like not taking things for granted and knowing that sometimes the wrong way is the right way, and to just never be afraid to kind of go through an obstacle, because perhaps on the other side of that is the key to the castle.
I mean, there's so much ancient wisdom in films with puppets.
Do you have a favorite puppet film?
Do I have a favorite puppet film? That's a great question. Um, it's probably Being John Malkovich, because like puppetry
Mm.
plays such an interesting role in that and like such a cool thematic thing. But I also just really like Yoda in Star Wars. It's kind of basic, but I mean, I think, don't, isn't that every wizard's dream to live on a swamp? Just chilling with the force, doing your own thing.
I don't know about the swamp part. That seems like an ogre dream, but I didn't know
Ah,
wizards also like swamps too.
yeah, that's my Shrek side.
So I mean, I've been dying actually, like even with our conversation that we had for your podcast, and I've done research, and I loved the New York Times article about you, but like I want to hear in your own words your path to wizardry, because it's very special and unique.
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. It's actually perfect timing because uh, next Monday is the 6-year anniversary of my ritual to become a wizard, November 30th.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So I moved to New York. I did a bunch of random stuff in my 20s. I was always like trying to be creative, but never like found my thing. I didn't play music. I didn't paint or draw. So I was always kind of like trying to pull together a weird kooky project and then having it fall apart and then like moving on to the next thing. So I moved to New York. I thought I was going to go to graduate school for television writing, and that program turned out to be a total joke. And I was like, oh, I could just go severely into debt to then go get an internship at a show on FX that'll get canceled in 3 months. Like,
Yeah.
sweet, that's so exciting. So I dropped out, and then I was just looking down at my 30s were a couple years out, and I was like, what do I want to do, man? Like it was like very quarter life crisis. I was like, what's next? I want something that I can do for a while. And so I think the smartest thing I ever did was I declared 2014 to be my egg year. I was like, this is the year that I lay the egg. It's not the year that I hatch it. It's not the year that I totally get it and figure everything out. I'm just going to make space to discover what this next chapter is. And so I did a bunch of kooky things. I was like writing little script that didn't go anywhere, and just kind of exploring different ideas and thinking a lot about what do I want to be when I grow up, that question. And that led me to ask another question of what does grown up mean? Is grown up 35? Is that like the arbitrary, is it 30? Is it 40? Like what age is grown up? And if it is one of those ages, you're going to blow right past that. We live much longer than that. So you're going to like become that thing. And then what? What's the next hill to climb? What do you do after that? And I started thinking about the idea of, well, what if grown up is like really old? Like what if grown up is like in your 80s? Then I have a long time to get there. I could be really lazy and slow. And I'm like, that's much more my pace. And I've always been into wizards. I've always practiced magic in this very weird, idiosyncratic way, but it was always kind of private. It was something that I held a little bit close to the vest, unless I got like drunk and then like rambled about like, this is what I think the universe means, man. But like that was like rare. And I realized that I was like, you know what? Those are my favorite conversations when I let that out. And if I could do anything, I'd like to just keep having those conversations forever. Like they're so fun when you talk about symbols and the cosmos and magic and what are we doing here, and just have fun with that as a conversational game. And so the idea, I don't know when it came up, but the idea to become a wizard landed, and it kind of checked a bunch of these boxes. It was totally bonkers weird, which I loved. Um, Wizards are very old. So I'd have a long time to grow into this role of being a wizard. And it would be a vehicle to let me talk about magic and mystery and these things that I found so exciting. And so I thought long and hard about, well, how does one become a wizard? Like how do I make that happen? And what I eventually landed on was the idea that I didn't think I could use magic to change my past. I didn't think that that was going to work, that I could like do a ritual, go to sleep, and then wake up in a mansion somewhere, having lived a different life. And if I could do that, I would be like killing the me that existed up into that moment. Be like, oh, what happened to that, Devin? And so I looked forward and realized that there was an infinite number of possibilities ahead of me. I could go become a total creep drug addict weirdo. I could go start a huge successful company. I could do, a lot of really boring things in between those extremes. There's so many possibilities that I could become. And of those possible possibilities, there had to be somewhere I became a wizard. If I could think of the idea, if I could commit to doing the basics of like getting a pointed hat, like that becomes a pathway of possibilities. And out of all of those, out of that weird cluster of like all the various me's that become a wizard, there's got to be one that's the most wizardly wizard of them all. And that line was this like golden thread that just stretched out all the way into the future, almost like a bright star. And I realized that the most wizardly me that I could possibly be is one day going to die. And on his deathbed, he is at the height of his powers. He sees back into the past. He sees the future. He's one with all of creation. And so that's a pretty magical motherfucker right there. And so if I'm going to turn into a wizard, that's who I need to help me. So I rented a rehearsal studio in Manhattan. This is like where improv teams go to practice, or they hold auditions for a play, or like a dance group, or a German polka music choir, like whatever. Like it's New York. You can rent a room for an hour and no questions asked. So I went in there and I did this whole little ritual thing. I lit candles, I changed clothes, I like practiced giving a speech about being a wizard with different attributes each time, and did all these things to kind of make contact with this future wizard and strike a deal and say, if you send your magic back in time so you can guide me into this future where you're at. I will then eventually become you. So it works out very well for you. If I don't do this, you don't exist. So like, oh, like, I kind of got you there. But if you extend this magic back, I'm going to have faith in this and understand that it's not going to look like a linear path. It's not going to be every time I snap my fingers, doors open, and the magic is just at my control. The magic is a current that I am writing. And so jobs that I think I really want, I'm not going to get. Relationships that I was like, oh, maybe that person's going to like me. They're going to ghost me. And I have to trust that we're cutting off branches that are not going to take me down to that golden thread, brilliant star at the end. And this is how it's going to go. And along the way, I'm tapping into a very powerful archetype, which is the wizard. It's a very resonant image in our culture, somewhat historically, but I think actually now more than ever. I think the wizard as an idea is more crystallized and clear now than if you went into a village in the 1500s and you're like, where is a wizard? And people are like, what? Like, I don't know. Like, my brother's uncle knows how to use herbs. Like, is that who you want? You want this midwife who's going to help you? Like, what do you want? So it's a bargain with both my future self and the wizard archetype, because people get curious when you say, I know a wizard, and they go, what? And so I know that all the people who meet me, I'm sure you can relate to this too. You've probably told someone that you have a wizard friend, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And it's like this fun joke that we all get to pass along because it brings this magic into the world. And then I also just am sacrificing my, human lifetime and hours of thought and calories of energy spent working on these various things to kind of just make this more real and manifest as I go. So that's
Mm.
how's that for a starter answer?
Perfect. It's great. And it's funny because it is so when you mentioned the word wizard, and I was like sharing to some friends about like, yeah, I'm interviewing my friend who's a wizard today. And they're like, oh, interesting. But it's like it sparks joy, at least for me, because every time I think of what that evokes, it's like that feeling of Merlin, that feeling of Gandalf, this like wise magic. It's not just like this ceremonial magician that's like, an Aleister Crowley kind of archetype. Like there's like a
Hmm.
playfulness and wizardry that I think is really special too.
I think seriousness is the death of magic.
Yes.
I think when you get so serious about it and you try and treat it like a science, man, if I wanted it to be a science, I'd go fucking do science. Like, it's not, it's not like these laws are not fixed in this like way. It's arbitrary. It's weird. It's closer to marketing than it is anything else. Um, it's not precise. It's human psychology. It's a relationship with the world. And you can get lost in endless complexity. So I've learned, I didn't start like this, but I've just learned through my own personality, I think, mixing with the wizard magic, that I like wizards because they're wise and they're idiots. Like they're grumpy, they're vain, they're uh, clumsy. They're making lots of wrong decisions, but then it kind of works out in the end. And I think that just feels so much more human than this era of Facebook ads for life coaches that are going to share with you the secret of how you can, be on this keto diet and meditate for 2 hours a day and perfect yourself. Which, if you can, good for you. That's great. Like, have fun. But I think a lot of people get suckered into paying for those aspirational dreams in a very predatory way.
Yes, and thank you for saying that. Literally, like I think I sound like a broken record, but something I've been saying with every like Instagram live I've been doing lately, and just in conversations, that there's no click funnel to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And you know if it's taking itself too seriously, then it's not for you.
Yeah.
Like magic has to maintain a sense of humor and levity and childlike wonder. If it's just like so beige namaste lame, it's like, oh god, it's another trap.
I mean, it's. I have made life so difficult for myself by refusing to really play the games that are already out there. Like it's it's constant frustration for me. But when I first started discovering magic, I discovered the particular vein of chaos magic, and chaos magic was saying, "Hey, like, it's about what you believe in. It's about your own perception. So go with that. Don't necessarily worry about getting it like perfectly right out of a book." And I was like, cool, I'm going to apply that even to these chaos magicians. I'm going to stop reading their books and I'm just going to go play around and see with what works for me and develop my own version of this, because I think that's where we get into trouble is we go find a bunch of people who maybe found something that works for them, maybe not. It's always hard to tell with these guru figures. And then we're paying them money so that, in the hopes that they can transmit it. But maybe that answer isn't the right answer for us. Maybe, most of these gurus did just pay $5,000 for a Tony Robbins course and then hit their own instant enlightenment. And they're like, oh, time to pay it forward. So I think it's such a chaotic world these days. You got to kind of stitch your own raft together.
Yes. Yeah. And I think like learning to surf the chaos and not be afraid of it is something that may be worth kind of diving deeper into. I talked about this recently with Michael Phillip on Third Eye Drops about this meme that I
Mm.
had shared a few weeks ago about, those Scooby Doo memes where it's like they're revealing the villain.
Yes, yes.
So it's like grand conspiracy theories, and then they take the mask off and it says, fear of a chaotic universe.
Mm-hmm.
There's like no thing, but I think, you know, we're so desperately in search of like the guru, the reason, the ultimate answer, but chaos, it's a term that I feel like can be like a little intimidating to sit with, like chaos. Oh my god, everything's chaos. But
And it can be very like seventh grade, like hot topic, like anarchy symbol, like chaos, man, I'm dangerous. I got black nail polish on. Don't fuck with chaos.
Totally. But it can also be like just absurd.
Yes.
Absurdity is chaos. How do you intellectualize that kind of humor, even,
I mean, I love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I think that series was like so formative for my sense of humor and approach to the world. And it paints this beautiful, chaotic, nonsensical universe that's like stitched together by weird coincidence and synchronicity. Because if you have infinity touches itself at every point, and so you're going to end up with all kinds of these weird patterns and miracles and these sorts of things. And then when you have a living creature that is designed to create patterns and find narratives and persevere, I mean, like, we are walking on a tightrope through chaos, but we're actually really good at it. We teeter back and forth, but that's kind of what makes it fun.
Totally. Yeah, and I love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, even thinking about the ultimate answer to the universe being 42.
Mm-hmm.
Some even said that like he chose that because the asterisk in coding language can represent everything and nothing. And
Mm.
if you have a double entendre thinking of like Crowley's quote of every man and every woman is a star,
Oh, that's great.
an asterisk in the punctuation of our life sentence.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think an asterisk is really great too, because it gets into this idea of meta-ness, right? You have a book, and then the asterisk signals, hey, like, look to the side for additional commentary on this. Like, look at the footnotes, basically. And the footnotes are a whole nother level of the game. Like, you read the book without footnotes, you read it with footnotes. There's two different stories there. And if you think about your footnotes having footnotes, then it could just be footnotes all the way down. And I think that's kind of where we find ourselves. Like, the moment that we think we've understood the whole game, we open another door and we realize that we're just in something far stranger than we thought possible.
totally. Totally. I mean that's the beauty of it too. Like, I don't know. I went through this phase of like really just wanting to like figure it all out, and then having like this like
Mm-hmm.
desperate need to find the answer, the truth, and like arrive at some ultimate destination. But the unending doorway, there's something so much more exciting about that, because it's like, wow, like this really is like a never ending infinite game, and what can we play with next, right?
It's like Scooby Doo again, of when they get chased by the spooky Frankenstein or whatever, and they like run through the doors, and they just keep popping out the door that doesn't make sense that they would have just come through. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally.
I think that's it. Because I mean, good Lord knows I've had plenty of moments where I'm like, I figured it all out. I will no longer deal with depression or anxiety. I will just have a nice, stable, consistent, enlightened mood from here on out. And like 2 days later, I'm like, I forgot it. I fucked up again. I'm like, oh. And then when I rediscover it, it's like, deja vu. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, this epiphany sounds really familiar. I feel like I've had it, I don't know, like 100
Yeah.
times.
But that's how we grow, right? Is like through that contrast. It's so funny kind of like being on the path, right? Where it's like you have ideas of these tools that are necessary to kind of help us through life's inevitables and mental health crises and this
Mhm.
capitalist society that we live in. But then when you like lose it and you're really just in a shit mood or like things are falling apart and you're like, God damn, everything sucks. And you're like, wait, no,
Yeah.
everything's magical and wonderful. And I just have to remember to remember.
Yeah, I feel like I was thinking about this earlier today. Like, it's like we're little fleas on the edge of a volcano or something. Like, our lifespan is very short, and so we can't perceive the huge arc of what's happening. So we get this like really tiny fraction of it. But along with that fraction, I think we get like a sense, like a deep internal sense of like there's more happening here. And so I think our culture is exploding right now. Like, the world is so different today than it was 10 years ago. And 10 years from now is going to be fucking bonkers. Like, for everyone that's like, oh, I can't wait to get back to normal after 2020, I have bad news for you. Normal is in the rear view mirror, and yeah, they're not. Normal's not coming back to pick us up from camp. It's gone. It's left,
Yeah, it's
and it's
disappeared.
disappeared. And there's a lot to mourn, about the natural world is going away and all of this, but like some weird hyper intelligent artificial intelligence goo is just going to explode out of our planet and spread itself around, and we're kind of just standing on the edge of that being like, what should I buy on Amazon? Does this career give me enough creative satisfaction? Like, who should I date? Trying to figure out these minor things as the world's exploding.
Completely. Yeah. And I mean, even just like the fact you mentioned, like 10 years from now, we're going back, like on our first round of trying to record this, we were talking about how, like, the last time we saw each other in person was a year ago at a Spangle show. And
Mm.
think about just the idea of being in a show like that now, how that feels so far away.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, like wait in a line, crowd into a room. It's really, I think, been fascinating this year to see us all adjust to something that isn't like, I think, like, for privileged people in the Western world, so many of our problems kind of are in our head. Like, our material circumstances change over time, and there's ups and downs, and bad things do happen. But we can basically be physically the same one week or the next, and we can completely be elated or freaking out and like depressive mess. And like, our security hasn't actually changed all that much. Like, everything's kind of the same. But then suddenly there was an event that was like, nope, this is not in your head. Like, the building is on fire. Like, you have to get up and do something different now. And it's weird to see how we've sort of normalized that already. Like, it's not that crazy to be like, hey, have you seen my mask and keys? I need to go run an errand.
Yeah, totally. That, and I mean, it's just it a year of this, you know. I just it's hard to contemplate just when anybody will ever, if we'll ever feel okay not having a mask on again, which is also very strange to sit with.
Or yeah, or the weird. I was in New York. I think you lived in Jersey before you moved to California, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in Brooklyn when the initial like quarantine part kicked in, and it was kind of cool that like more or less everyone was in the same boat. Like, some people still had essential work jobs, and some people had just been fired, and some people had digital work from home jobs. So like there was plenty of different things, but like there was this like nothing's open, there is no FOMO. Like,
Yeah.
everybody is at home, and now it's so weird because we're kind of heading back into the storm, and yet there's places that are like bars are open, people are doing shit, like people are about to fly home to see their family for Thanksgiving. Like, this ain't no thing. And then other people are like, I haven't seen another human being since March. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy how yeah, how differentiated it's stratified. It's made everything, and I have no idea how we're gonna. Are there some people that are just gonna like live in protective suits, and other people that are gonna be like disease vectors forever? Like, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so hard to tell, you know? It's like my two favorite kind of metaphors for this time and just life in general have been like that rabbit duck image. You know what I'm talking
I
about?
have that tattooed on my
Of
ankle.
course you
Yeah.
do. Amazing. Because it's so fitting, you know, like it's such a good point that you made. Like a few 2 weeks ago, I saw a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in 3 years, and she has literally been in isolation for the last year. She is so scared of COVID. Uh, I, I, it hurt for me to spend time with her to just feel the level of fear radiating and
Hmm.
pulsating through her every cell. But then on the other hand, you know, you have other people like, fuck it, margaritas, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in the middle, you know. I think my biggest concern is like worrying about being a carrier or getting someone sick or being somebody that like after that Spangle show, like we had said initially, you know, I really think I had corona like early because I was sick for a
Mm.
month after that and had all of the symptoms. But I wouldn't want to go through that again if that's actually what it was.
Yeah.
But it's hard to tell.
And I mean, it's such a crazy metaphor for, you know, the kind of metaphysics and head fuckery that I think you and I are interested in more generally. Of, okay, like at one level, there's a virus. This is a thing that physically exists and it spreads and it makes people sick. That's what we'll call a fact. But that's also just like our understanding of that. Like you and I can't see the virus. So we're taking somebody's word that this is true, that there is a thing called a virus and it does exist. And that's, you know, depending on who you talk to, not that controversial. Like that's pretty basic. But when you start getting beyond that, we get into this total clusterfuck of, well, what is your source of information and what is it telling you and how are you responding to that? And two people could live next door to each other and one of them is currently convinced that the coronavirus is end times and they can't leave the house without like wrapping themselves in saran wrap, and then the person next to them is having orgies and is reading news that says this is fake. It's the flu. It's not a big deal. Like, you know, this is a crazy scare tactic by some global conspiracy. You know, and that's just our world right now. Is it's really everyone's got a different set of cards that they're playing with, and it's very hard to agree on the
Ugh,
rules.
it's the rabbit duck.
It's the rabbit duck, yeah, yeah. It's like we're playing chess and checkers at the same time, and so like, which game is it? Like, yes, it's the same board, but playing the game of rabbit and playing the game of duck are very different.
Totally. I think something in this time too that's been interesting is like kind of like oscillated, you know, in time of isolation, in time of like all of this revelation and all of this high strangeness. I my own connection to magic and meaning has kind of like ebbed and flowed, but I'm finding another current
Hmm.
back to that space of magic, of space of creation, space of like, okay, well, Trump is no longer president. We can kind of give a collective exhale, but also Biden is not necessarily the messiah by any means. So, how do we
Hmm.
focus on things that we can create and control and the power of our own imagination? So, like with your own relationship to magic and traversing times that are a little more difficult, I mean, how would you kind of riff on that maybe?
Well, the first thought that's coming to mind is there was this existential psychologist in the 20th century named Rollo May, and he has a book about creativity, and it's very it's very readable, but it's very like heady. It's not just like here's how to get your colored pencil sharpened. It's like what is creativity? What does it mean to make a great work of art? And there's this idea of like nothingness that he talks about, and we have to kind of like it's like nothingness is almost like a cheese grater. We have to like rub ourselves against it to then find these new things that come out of nothingness. And that's why the creative process is kind of brutal. Like, you know, we have all of these damaged musicians that OD and various painters that go mad and all this stuff because it's hard to push yourself into that nothingness and continue to kind of rough yourself up in the pursuit of what's going to come out of it. And I think that's the struggle that I've felt this year more clearly with so many of the other distractions of just, you know, going out and seeing people and things set aside. Is there's the one desire to go internally into myself, to try and be creative, to try and actively work with my imagination. I've been trying to explore new rituals, specifically around the idea of gnomes as being a totem and guide that can kind of help us play with that imagination space. And that's fun and also difficult, like it's both. But then the distraction, the thing that I want to get away from, but is so hard, it's got so much gravity, is all of this news soap opera stuff. Like, you know, it doesn't affect my day to day life. It shouldn't, of what's happening in Washington, on a day to day basis. Like, policy changes will eventually impact, but like, I don't need to know it the second after it happened. And it's so hard. I am trying to solve that myself of like, how do I pull away from this narrative at the highest level that is sucking my energy and try and focus on things on a smaller scale, whether that's just being present in my daily routine of chores and cooking and cleaning and so on, or trying to push that out a little bit more. And like, I don't know, I've been volunteering in a community garden, and it's one day a week or so it's not anything crazy, but try to just appreciate that as like, if we can grow food for each other, we can start changing things in a different way.
Yes. Yeah, an appreciation of that, you know? Again, where there's no going back. I don't I would hate it actually, like all of a sudden we just went back to normal, right? Because I mean, things are
Hmm.
only going to speed up, more technology is going to advance faster, the world is going to change faster, the climate is going to pick up. There's so many things that, like, again, what the next 10 years are going to look like are pretty wild, right?
I think we gotta hold together. I mean, I think everybody's starting to think about this. It's not that original idea, but I think for our generation, it's going to be very weird when the kids who grew up with iPhones start becoming the ones in the driver's seat. And I think there's going to be a point where we can't really hang with culture that well. Like, the way that a grandparent trying to use email or something, is a steeper curve. It's just gonna get steeper and steeper, and I think there's gonna be a point where we're like, yeah, I can't really do the like nasal spray VR nanobots. It makes me feel sick and disoriented. So
Yeah.
like, me and my fellow millennials are gonna go live on ecotech solar farms and just try and hang out and do mushrooms around the campfire, and like, the world's just going to get crazier and we're going to kind of retreat from it, maybe. Like, I don't know what else we can do. You can either like
Yeah,
stand in the blast or try and hide behind a rock, but I think those are the
totally.
main options.
Well, I think the thing is to not sink into the trap of convenience, you know, like to be like, well, everything's at my fingertips, everything's convenient, everything is comfortable. I think that convenient comfortableness is a lot of what's kind of sped this process up in the first place. But I think one of the interesting revelations, especially during the time of like COVID, is just how fucking stupid this culture of celebrity is.
Oh yeah. What was that when like when Gail Gadot or whatever her name is, the Wonder Woman gal, like did that video of them all singing Imagine? Do you
Oh
know? Do
my
you remember
god,
this?
yeah, that was height cringe.
And
Oh
it
my
was just
god.
amazing to like pull the mask back, and you're like, oh, any of these people could be like my rich friend's dumpy dad. Like, like it's not like, oh my God. It's like, it's so funny that they kind of accidentally pulled back the curtain and they're like, we're just like you, and we actually don't know what to do with social media that well. There's a whole generation of people that are like, yo, we're really good at social media. We're just going to keep doing our thing. And you
Yeah.
suddenly realize that you're like, yeah, like I'd rather follow some teenager from Oregon on TikTok than see what this celebrity who's trying to cling to relevancy. Like, oh my God, Jimmy Fallon doing the Tonight Show from his house. Oh,
Oh my
it
god,
was
I
so bad.
cringe.
It was so bad.
So bad. And it's just like so transparent too, seeing it and be like, damn, I'm like, these people literally, it's like if they're like an archetype, what they feed off of is attention. And without
Hmm.
attention, it's like like there were some certain videos I saw of them like, are they dying? Like, are they not getting their essence? Like
Hmm.
I mean, I don't believe the adrenochrome thing. I think that they actually
Oh
feed
no,
off
it's
of
an attention
attention.
economy. Absolutely.
Attention for sure.
Yeah, that is the crucial currency these days. Money is very secondary. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, something like Cameo is really funny to me, where it's like, it's you can just kind of eke out a living recording birthday videos for people, try to milk your like sub VH1 surreal life level celebrity.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, everything's got a price. Like I looking at Cameo recently. Everybody Depop's on there for $200 or $300. I mean, you could
Mhm.
just everything now. Nothing is real. You know, it's like nothing is real. Everything has a price. Actually, the most
Yeah.
priceless things that actually have real entertainment value come from what was his name? Dogface, the guy that was skateboarding, listening to Dreams.
Oh yeah, he was great.
Yeah. I mean, that made my week, the week that that came out, because 'cause I'm just like, "Yes, exactly this. Skateboarding and drinking cranberry juice and listening to Fleetwood Mac. This is a perfect non sequitur."
And it is funny, like something going viral, I think, has changed over the last 20 years. And it's not just like we've all seen the video, but it's like the way that it moves through, and then there's like this ripple of like people reposting it and commenting on it, or like posting a parody video, and the culture kind of like experiences it together in the same way that if we were on a road trip and we saw a funny billboard, we'd all be like, ah, and like read the billboard and keep driving, and everyone in the car is like, yes, we experienced that, and now it's gone. And our culture, it's
Yeah.
so weird to be all at home, yet even more like tuned in together, like, oh, we're all binge watching the show and making sourdough, or it feels that way, and that's actually, just one tiny bubble, and that's not what people are doing in Czech Republic, or or down the street from you. Like, you don't know, the bubble feels all encompassing, but it's really hard to see where the boundaries lie.
Totally. Yeah, and even oh my god, the phase of us all baking bread. It just this fucking year, all of those things is just so
Like, we
strange.
have nostalgia for, like, I personally, I'm not gonna project on anybody, but like I have nostalgia for like vintage quarantine. Like vintage quarantine, mwah. Oh, I love vintage quarantine.
Uh,
Like I was actually getting myself excited. I was like, oh, like I don't know, I'll fuck around with another round of like stay indoors and don't do anything. Like that sounds cool. And then as I'm actually getting into it, I'm like, no, I don't like it as much this time. I preferred vintage quarantine. It was just the novelty is wearing off. I'll
Yeah, no
say.
more novelty, and I mean, you can't replicate Tiger King. That came and went. So, I mean, I don't
Hmm.
know what series could even come out that could kind of like fit that amalgam of high strangeness. But I mean, again, like from that time, vintage quarantine to now thinking about like quarantine round 2, whatever. I think a big thing that a lot of us has realized through it is like loneliness is a real thing,
Yep.
and we live in a society that is built around loneliness.
Hmm.
We have this false sense of connection from these devices that we hold in our hands, but really like how we thrive is being around people that we care about and help us feel inspired.
Hmm. I it's like chemistry. There's ways that you dissolve things and then you can use their parts and recombine them for something else. And we're at an accelerating point of a long history of dissolution. I've been reading this book called The Weirdest People in the World. And
Mm.
weird is about Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. And so the basic principle is that for a long time, psychology was doing all these tests on the undergrads that were available at these universities and making these definitive claims of like, this is what human psychology is like. And then recently we've expanded to places that aren't American university campuses and realized, oh, actually, no, weird people are weird. They're different. Their psychology is not the same as everybody else. And other parts of the world that have more intensive kinship networks, that you're more in like a structured thing rather than this kind of like Western individualist idea, have a different psychology. Like they see the world differently. They value things differently. And it's exploring the process of how did these bonds dissolve and what did that allow and how did that actually kind of create industrialization and capitalism. And I think we're just in another chapter of that, where we used to, maybe we didn't live in the same place that our families lived in, or we weren't, friends with our neighbors in the same way, but we were still like cramming into bars and going out and like interacting with other people. That's a totally different model than trying to have Zoom happy hours and posting what you thought about Tiger King on Facebook.
Yeah, no, that's like Black Mirror, you know?
Oh yeah.
Highly prophetic, that show felt. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think like the what's his name, the guy that made it even was saying he's like, yeah, we're not going to do any episodes for a little while. Like,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know, the
man.
reality itself feels too much like that right now to comment on it.
Did you watch Bandersnatch?
No, I never did. I thought that sounded like cool, but again, the other problem with these infinite worlds of TV shows is it's hard to watch them all.
Yeah, that one I'd recommend because there's a
Yeah.
monologue where, two of the main characters take acid and the guy's talking about like, kind of like one of those like recreational paranoid riffs, but he's talking about like
Mm,
Pac-Man, and Pac-Man actually stands for program and control. And you think of the metaphor of Pac-Man, which is this thing, and it's just about like consumerism, and all he does is
mhm,
consume, and he's just being chased by these ghosts. That one, like, it's such a brilliant metaphor of like thinking of like what we're kind of like navigating this. Like we're just blindly looking for things to consume and like never satisfied. I have mixed emotions on Daniel Pinchbeck, but he does have a great quote about how we live in a culture where everything tastes good but nothing satisfies. So I've been
mhm.
thinking about that a lot too.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how fast these things change. Like you watch a movie from the '60s or even '70s, and there's this idea of this very cookie cutter like 1950s business suit guy that represents the establishment, and like the free thinkers are trying to rebel against that. And it's all been scrambled by now. Like the corporate guys are the ones that are microdosing and talking about their startup, and they're like everything is subculture now. Everything is craziness and just bonkers off the wall. So I think I have the dawning realization that we've almost moved out of this age of consumerism. Not that it's not still what we're all doing, but it's not the top of the pyramid. It's not the most important thing. And this attention is really where it's at. I think, our eyeballs are eating whatever Disney Plus or HBO or Netflix are feeding us each night, or the Facebooks or the social media feeds. And it's this whole new economy about where are we looking and how are we using our human psychic brain power to bring various ideas to life, whether that's the seventh movie in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise or political party.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's such an important point. I read an article, God, 3 or 4 years ago, and I wish I could remember what it was from, but there was just this brilliant quote about how data is actually being mined as a natural human resource. So
Mm-hmm.
our attention span, where we're putting our time, where we're putting our energy, this is constant dopamine fix on our phone, when really like if we put the phone down and maybe just remember to play a little, put our hands in the dirt, plant something, look at the sky. Those are things that I feel like it's just that's kind of the new subculture is getting back to nature.
Yeah, it's definitely that's been a theme this year. I left New York City and moved to Kentucky, and it was like kind of like right when it was hard to tell because my life changed at this moment, but it was also I think when like vintage quarantine was kind of ending. So my birthday was April 28th, and my partner and I were thinking about like, do we want to make this decision? And so we took some acid on my birthday. We had a great time. And I had this moment where I just watched this dove on a tree outside of my window and like cried for 30 minutes just watching this dove. And I was like, I'm not leaving until you fly away. Like, I'm here with you. I'm holding space for you. And like classical music was like swelling in the background. And it was very pastoral and beautiful. And I had this just thing of like, I'm so okay with stepping away from whoever it was I was before this happened. Like running around, trying to put on events, trying to go to different things, just chase, chase, chase. Like I read books about this stuff and I want to go live it. I want to go be a hermit and like sit on a moss covered boulder by a stream and like that's my busy afternoon. That's what I want to spend more of my time doing. And paradoxically, I now own a car for the first time in my life. And weirdly, that like owning a car lets you get out of cities and into nature more freely. Feels such like a yeah, it's just
Who
like it's like,
knew?
oh, that thing that's representative of industrial society actually helps you escape it. But trying to go out in the woods and take a walk more often, just like it's nice to do those simple things and to be in a space where nothing wants you to click on it.
Yeah. And how, I mean, making that transition from New York to Kentucky, I mean, that's a big move. The adjustment period, I'm sure, had to be interesting, but even just kind of connecting deeper to your own practice as a wizard and your magic, like, would you say making that choice to transition there has been like integral to kind of traversing this time?
Oh, I mean, it's like we don't get to hear the other podcasts that we would have recorded yesterday if my internet hadn't gone out. I don't get to know what it would have been like to spend this year in New York. I only get my one narrative, and I have to draw my conclusions from that. But it's earlier when I talked about becoming a wizard, I talked about this idea of like, oh, it's going to take me a long time, and I'll be patient and just I'm so bad at that. I say it. That's my talking point. I'm so bad at following through, and I constantly want to like rush things and like 1, 2, 3. Like, why isn't it that changed? I had the idea. Like, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And so it's been really wild this year to go through this process of, is it crazy to move during a pandemic, and like doubting myself. And my partner was the one who had a much clearer vision, a lot more belief, and kind of pushed me to take the leap. And then leaping and having that moment of terror when we got here, where I was like, did I make a mistake? Is this right? Like, what am I doing?
Mm.
And then actually finding all of this magic along the way, and things working out better than I could have imagined. And kind of, it was like falling down the stairs and then landing on your feet, and like, your drink sloshes back into the cup, and you're like, well, that worked out. Um, and it's definitely, I've moved a lot as a person, like not like constantly, but it's like, episodic. Like I'll have a chapter of my life in one place and then I'll move. I was about to hit 7 years in New York. That would have been the longest I'd lived anywhere. And when you move, you leave behind all of these things that were patterns that you were doing regularly, but you'd kind of grown out of. You were just doing them because that's what your friends did, or that's like what you knew to do. And then when you move, all these ideas that are like barely little seeds suddenly have new soil, and they could be like, hey, here's this thing that you've like fantasized about doing about, and like now you have time to do it, or like you're going to meet people that want to do it, and you're like learning from them. So I, at the beginning of the year, was trying to do a book. I was talking to a publisher and was actually supposed to meet them in the Bay Area, like right before the quarantine really hit. And then they were still going forward and pitching, but it was right when things were like, no one knew which way was up. And so my editor pitched this book. It didn't get approved. They didn't approve anything in that meeting. And it was like, bummer. Okay, that's not going to happen. But I reached out to a friend right when I was like waiting on the news to get a tarot reading. And the tarot reading sparked this thing where it was like, oh, this isn't about this book deal. Like, that's like whatever. I need to do this long form ritual. I did one of these before when I became a wizard, and like the time is right. I need to do one of these like multi-month rituals where I kind of move through a cycle, a narrative that I create for myself. And this one's going to be about gnomes, and it's going to be about growth. So I started with soil and had a month where it was kind of about like just like preparing the ground for what was to come. The next was seed. After that was sprout, so on and so forth. And so starting in April, it's been this 8 month thing. I'm now in the final sequence, the final month of it. And it was absolutely staggering how that growth metaphor fit the exact timing of like various things, of like moving out, of landing here, of having this kind of temporary period where we were just bouncing around waiting to move into our house, landing here, getting set up, blossoming, having these habits, like have new soil that they can like spring forth into. And so this is kind of a rambling answer, but I think it's the way that I've
Mm.
found magic to be helpful and harmful. Is it's helpful when it gives you this larger narrative that you can see and you can really relish. And then it can be harmful when you get impatient and you are expecting, you lose sight of the big picture, and you're like on an individual day, you're like, why don't I feel perfect? Why isn't everything magically better? Like, blah, why am I stressed about this thing? And now I can look back and kind of offer some reassuring magic to all of those various me's that had those moments of doubt, and be like, no, like keep coming, like just it's gonna suck for 2 weeks, but then it'll get better. Or like, yeah, that's gonna be hard, and then it'll work out.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you kind of use the seed metaphor, you know. Various seeds thrive in various environments, and not the same seed is going to thrive in the same environment, you know. It makes me think of that Lao Tzu quote about how like nature doesn't hurry, yet everything is accomplished. And you can't force change. You can inspire it and tend to it, but the timing of things, that's a real discipline in and of itself when working in like magical ineffable realms, is like trusting that your ritual has taken, but also having the patience to let it develop and sprout.
Absolutely. And the best example I can give of this is for my seed month, I was sprouting an avocado seed. Like you can,
Mm.
take the pit of an avocado and sprout it by putting like toothpicks in its side and let it sit in water. And I drove from New York to Kentucky with that seed. I was like, I'm doing this thing. Like, this is my magic. I'm taking it with me. And we were staying at this house that had this little back porch that looked out onto the backyard. And it was like on the third floor. So, like, right by a tree. And there's a little space. So it was starting to sprout. Like, the little tendril was coming up and out. And I was like, oh, let me leave it outside to get a little bit of fresh air and blah, blah, blah. And a fucking squirrel took it. A
Oh
squirrel took my
no.
magic seed. And I was like, no. And at first I had that moment of like, like, what does this mean metaphorically and magically? Like, oh no, like, is this a bad omen? Like, what do I do? And I was like, well, I'm not going to cancel the ritual because a fucking squirrel took my seed. So I'm just going to like pick myself back up and like be flexible. And all right, like, I'm going to try this new technique that synchronistically a friend was like, I'm sprouting avocado seeds with this new technique I found. It's amazing. And I'm like, cool. He told me that like 2 days before the squirrel took my seed. Let's try his technique. Let's go for it. Out of that batch of three, only one really like got going good. And now it's amazing. This plant's fucking beautiful. It's sitting on my desk. I'm looking at it right now. It has all these huge, big leaves. It's doing so well. And that's not the seed that I started with in New York. And so I think that's what
Mm.
you need to realize sometimes with magic is that it's not, input output. It's not like I ordered a pizza and then the pizza came. It's like I ordered a pizza and then the pizza driver got a flat tire, and then when somebody stopped to pick him up, like, it was his long lost brother, but then that led to like somehow Chinese food ending up at your door, and you're like, okay, I guess this is what I'm gonna eat. So it's, yeah, you got to plant a lot of seeds, and it's going to surprise you which ones will grow.
Yes. I love that. And that's such a great metaphor, Devin. 'Cause I remember like one of the last times I did ayahuasca, God, I mean, I haven't done ayahuasca in like a year, but I had this.
Oh yeah, you had like a crazy time, right? Like you had like a
Yeah, I had like a total fucking demonic possession, like exorcist. But it was everything I never knew I
yeah.
needed. And I'm very glad that I had it now in
Mhm.
retrospect. But in another ceremony, I remember having this whole kind of like discourse with cosmic forces about magic being a force of creation, not control. So anytime you think that
Mm.
you want to like have some semblance of
Yes.
control, don't play with magic because it's about creation,
Yeah.
and creation has a mind of its own.
Oh, I love that. That's so helpful because I get hung up on this all the time because I like reading about magic and stuff, and there's a very popular vein of it right now with people doing ancient traditional things out of grimoires and summoning demons, and it's this complex Renaissance magic. And like, that's not what I do. I've never
Yeah.
been a good enough student for that. Like, I
Feels so serious, you know? I don't really wanna hang out with Ball, like, I wanna, like,
yeah,
you know?
and so yeah, it's like I will get in my head and be like, oh, like, am I not being rigorous enough? Is my magic not effective enough if I'm not doing this? And then I'll be like, wait, hold on. Like, I'm not launching sigils each week to make like very specific things happen. But if I look at the arc of my life, I mean, last year on the anniversary of the 5 year anniversary of my ritual to become a wizard, my partner and I were traveling through Kentucky, checking it out as someplace that we might want to be in like 5 years. We're like, all right, like, this is the next chapter, but like not yet. Like, we love New York. We're staying in New
Yeah.
York. And so we did a ritual on this anniversary where we committed ourselves to like our future in Kentucky and our future Kentucky selves. And then a fucking global pandemic happened. And then within 6 months, we were in Kentucky. Like, so,
Wow.
like, one, I'm sorry, everybody. I didn't mean to cause a global pandemic. Like, might be, forgive me. But it's, it's again, this variation between myopic view of the day to day and like the control that you're trying to have over these things, and then the larger sweep where you're like, oh yeah, if you change the angle a little bit, 6 months from now you're going to be standing someplace very different.
Totally. Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like this. I mean, I love this term now because this study group that I was in New York before I moved to LA, we were studying like Alice Bailey and Freemasonry and like
Mm,
Theosophy, and my teacher called like the New Age stuff New Age, like sewage, because like a lot of
mm,
it is so like quid pro quo. If I do this, I get that. If I think about the car, I get the Lamborghini. If it's like very much like this, that, give me that. And
mm,
I think like leaving space for the mystery to unfold and that like letting go of that control, like even I echo a similar but different obviously story of like moving cross country in a pandemic, and really what
yeah,
cosmic forces pushed me to do it was having like a really traumatic falling out with my stepfather that like was like so awful, but you know what, it was
yep,
the kick in the ass I needed. I'm like, you know what, fuck it,
hmm,
thank you. If he didn't do this, I would just stay in a comfort zone of just like trying to wait for the right moment while I'm living at my mom's miserable and like eating chips every night. You know?
it's so hard to move out of comfort.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I think is so hard. And um, so, yeah, like when you are in a place of comfort and then you want to force yourself to do something, it's really hard. Like, I don't have to do anything today. I could just lay in bed and watch TV, but I should be creative. I should work on this project. I should go work out. I should do this. It's really hard to push towards that. If you're uncomfortable, you will be the most motivated motherfucker there ever was. Like, if you are sleeping outside and you have nothing, you're like, you know what I'm going to spend my afternoon doing? Making a shitty shelter. Like, I'm gonna get that task done. I'm not gonna just like lie on the ground and be like, I don't feel like it. And so, yeah, it's really hard. I think that's one of the things that we suffer from is it's so comfortable and so convenient. If we want to do anything, it's not just the like effort of doing it, it's the effort of not staring at our phone, scrolling through Instagram, watching TV, eating a snack, like doing just all of these comfortable things. It's like really, water wants to stay in the low places. It's hard to push it uphill.
Yeah. Yeah, befriending discomfort, befriending the obstacle. Somebody that was like a panelist at this event I did had this. She was talking about the Joseph Campbell quote of like following your bliss, and saying about how if
Mm-hmm.
Campbell could revise it, he'd say to follow your blisters, because that's actually
Mm,
where the goodness exists and lives.
mm-hmm.
Because yeah, there's nothing good comes from comfort and complacency. I mean, I love comfort. I'm a creature comfort. I love convenience. I love to just
Mm-hmm.
be cuddled up in a ball and watching Jim Henson movies. But am I creating
Yeah.
anything good from that space? No. The best shit I've ever created is from brokenheartedness and death and destruction and chaos. And, you know, that it's hard to wrestle with that, but it's actually a tool. It's an alchemical tool with the right lens, right?
And I mean, it's one of the things that's at the core of this that I struggle with is like, is being creative another trap? Like, we all, I think, in this generation are convinced that the most worthwhile thing that we can do with a Saturday afternoon is somehow to be making that like amazing album or content or podcast or like whatever it might be, and that if we're not creating something, we're kind of being bad. Like, that's kind of like, not as good. And I feel like there's this like Protestant work ethic that's like ingrained in that at a level that's so obscured now with all of these commercials that want to remind you over and over that, like, like a Nike ad is just this mantra of like, push yourself, push yourself, push yourself, be unique, be the best. So
Just do it.
just fucking do it, obey, just do it. And trying to find that balance between like what is natural, spontaneous, organic, imaginative creation, and what is trying to like have one part of my psyche beat up the other part of my psyche for not like doing the thing that we arbitrarily decided that we were supposed to do right now.
Yeah, that's the rub. I think that's the rub of being a creative, though, because it's like I always try to, the metaphor that I find most appropriate for it is like when you're a creative person or when you're like living in the imagination realm a lot, it's this constant itch to do that is never, you can't scratch it away. It's just a constant like, okay, what do I do, what do I do? But like when you're for me at least, it's like not even a matter of like creating something as to turn a profit. It's like I just have to exercise whatever this
Mhm.
energy is moving. So I guess it's just recontextualizing your creativity too.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that Rollo May thing I was talking about earlier of like it's like this cheese grater of nothingness that you have to grind yourself into, and
Yeah.
it's cool when you look back and you see what you did. But the like it like sometimes creation is joyful. Like yes, sometimes you're totally in a flow state, but um, I don't know. Like most of my creativity is through writing, and I there's some quote I forget who said it, but like I don't enjoy writing. I enjoy having written. So even though I know that I'm good at it, I know that I enjoy when it's done. When it's like my afternoon is like, oh right, I have to go write that intro for this podcast. Like, okay, maybe I'll do something else first. And like, even though I want to do it, like, how can I procrastinate? How can I avoid this confrontation with the unknown for just a little bit longer before I get it done? And then I feel so much better for having done it. And like the other side is great, but it's like that you got to push through that eye of the needle over and over.
Totally. That's such a good quote. I don't enjoy writing, I enjoy having written.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really relate to that. And that's funny. I actually just the camel through the eye of the needle. I referenced that today too. So that's a funny little random specific synchronicity right there.
Oh, what was your earlier reference?
I instead of saying nail, I said male. I was like, that's the final nail in the coffin. And
Mm.
my friend and I were kind of like going back and forth about it. I was like, yeah, you can't go through the eye of the needle on a camel with too much mail on your back.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, a big theme of this year was letting go of a lot of baggage and purging
Well,
toxic friendships and all the shit that just I don't want to carry through the eye of the needle.
that's one of the things that I've been reading about in this book of so like how did the church kind of dissolve these social bonds that then allowed our industrialized capitalist society to spring up. And previously we were all part of dense interconnected family networks, and ownership was by the family network, not the individual. Like your dad didn't own the thing, the family owned it. If the dad died, somebody else in the family is like controlling it, but like they can't just sell it. Like the whole family owns it together. And in early Rome, as Christianity was spreading, there was a lot of concern about like, well, it's Jesus said it's easier to get a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. So I'm a rich man, like, oh shit, like how do I get into heaven? And the church started saying, well, if you give a bunch of your money to the church, then that counts, and then you can go to heaven. And you want to use that wealth while you're alive, so just do it after you're dead. Just bequeath it to the church. And that was a new concept that they had to like change a lot of social structures to make doable. But that was the motivation. That was kind of why the church was so interested in dissolving these traditional family relationships, because that got in the way of people giving over a bunch of their money to the church when they died. And that's how the church ended up controlling, like, I think at some point it had like 60% of the land in Germany and like 70% of someplace else. Like
Mm.
the church owned everything,
Yeah, no taxes either, right? They get all the tax breaks. They're owning everything. It's
just
like a fucking George
just
Carlin skit.
everything. Hmm.
Wow. No wonder Jesus was so pissed that he flipped the tables and whipped everybody in the temple, He saw it.
It's so funny. And like whatever the basic story is, it's the interpretations that ultimately lead to the effects in the world. And it's so funny that there's this whole religion about this anti-prophet radical that now that like was like his core message, if you heard nothing else, was like take care of the poor,
Yeah.
the downtrodden, and now is used to justify like being some obscene wealthy billionaire lobbyist that's having prayer circles with the Republican Senate committee.
Yeah, and not for nothing, like his merch is him dead on a crucifix. Like how did that happen? How did this like anarchist, like radical, amazing, like I love all the Gnostic texts and like if you just like really
Hmm.
extract the pearls from it. I'm like, how did that turn into all this merch and pageantry and capitalism and just nonsense? It's like, oh, that's just what a world.
And I think like we're seeing it currently. If you think about punk rock, there are certain bands that I think have gone beyond what their music means and what their actual like legacy was, and they've kind of just merged with graphic design.
Mm.
Like wearing a Misfits t-shirt or a Black Flag t-shirt is so iconic and clear. I mean, like the Joy Division logo, like or the album cover of Unknown Pleasures. These things become signifiers of their own, sort of distance from what the actual content of the band was. Like,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, someone well, there's that Black Mirror episode where the person goes on TV and they're like holding the fucking broken glass to their throat and they're like, "This is a consumerist nightmare. I'm gonna fucking kill myself." And they're like, "Yes, that's great content. We're giving you a show.
Yeah. Are you not
Like,
entertained?
are you not entertained?" Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird that it's like is turning into a meme just the natural progression of things? Like whether it's like a band, an art, a movement, whatever. It's like is the meme the final form of whatever?
I don't think it's the final form, but I think it's part of this. So Alan Moore talked about we've gone through these different stages of life and existence, and right now it's like the different states of matter, and we've gone from solid to liquid, and now we're going from liquid to gas. Human culture is turning
Mm.
into steam, and that means that a lot of the molecular bonds are being broken, and things are coming together in different ways. And so if you think about a piece of content in the 1950s, whether that's a Reader's Digest article or a TV show or whatever, it's packaged, it's produced, it's disseminated in a very top down way. Whereas right now, we're all mainly consuming memes, which are made by anonymous strangers. Who fucking knows who made a meme that you looked at? Like
Yeah.
99.9999999% of the time, you're like, no idea.
Yeah, like fucking where did Big Chungus come from? Like I really want to know.
And they're like, yeah, and they evolve and they reference each other, and you saw a meme format grow into something else, and then a meme references the meme format in a new way, and it's a totally different piece of content. It's a new animal, and I think the next chapter, which is going to get really scary. So like up until this moment, up until 2020, and what's happened this year is like we've kind of lost those like going outside and looking at something, and now we're seeing so much of our world through the screen. Like it was going in that direction, and now it's just like fucking vertical. It's crazy,
Yeah.
and it's going to get weirder to understand who the other people are. Like I don't know who my Facebook friends are anymore. I've like said yes to so many fucking random friend requests. Like I don't know who these people are. It's not like these friends from high school. It's like fucking random fake name. I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
And if bots started to slowly infiltrate my Facebook feed from the edges, if like weird AI personalities that are creating memes and posting them, it would take me a long time to start to notice. Like
Yeah.
I just be like, oh,
Totally.
okay, and if you keep going with that, eventually I could be interacting with a social media feed that I think is real, but it's entirely fake. It's entirely fake people posting fake content, and I'm just like clicking my way through it. And then how do we connect with each other? How do we know that the pen pal that I have on OkCupid is not a bot that's ultimately going to try and use psychology to get me to watch a new Netflix series? Like that's going to get weirder and weirder. So I think kind of like the way in Terminator, they're like hiding in these tunnels and they have dogs to like sniff who's real. I think we're going to have to try and find more opportunities to, you know, touch each other's faces and reconnect as humans, which is very hard when there's a pandemic. So tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, the great paradox of what we are occupying right now, and we live it. We've become lost in a fake world, and the real world we can't even participate in because of a virus that, you know, it's very strange,
Yeah,
strange times.
I
But
don't get into the conspiracy theories, but it definitely, I think there is a lot of disaster capitalism of like, oh, okay, like it was going to take us a while to push everybody in this direction. Now that the virus has made that more possible, let's just up the ante. Let's just see how far we can go.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, referencing archons again, but it always it makes
Our
it
cuts are
makes
great.
they're great. They're not so great, but I mean
No, they're
yeah,
awful.
they're awful. But the idea that like I saw this meme that I posted. It was like Homer Simpson looking up into the sky at night, and it's like that moment when you realize that like all the fear porn that's going on right now is just like a further form of divisiveness to prevent you from living in the
Hmm.
present moment. And it's like the fear
Hmm.
porn is coming from both sides. Like I don't even get me started about how much I couldn't stand that fucking pandemic movie, but like it's all sides of it are participating in something that maybe like we're all back to the puppets. What's your favorite puppet movie? Maybe The World right now. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's you said earlier that thing about like the behind the conspiracy theory is the fear of chaos, And there's so many ways that we project these narratives onto the world. It's not just conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are just kind of a more extreme example where it's literally doing like cut ups with the news and putting it into its own order rather than actually trying to see what the story is. And yeah, it's getting harder and harder for us to find those common points that we can use as leverage to like get on the same page. And so I think if we're all going to get fractionated, it's about it's so I hate what I'm about to say because I think like the kind of Burning Man like find your tribe, blah 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 is it rubs me the wrong way. I think there's a lot of fakeness in that,
Yeah.
but
I
I
I can't
think
hold space for that.
yeah, like well, it's just a lot of like self-congratulation and
Yeah.
like, like we're changing this. There's like the dawning of a new aeon. And I'm like, yeah, everything just get used to contradiction. Everything's gonna be extremely good and bad at the same time. Like everything's, there is no utopia, there is no dystopia. It's just a hot injection of 30 gigs of memes into your fucking forehead and like your brain trying to process that.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a it's there's power in that realization, right? Like my utopia isn't your utopia, the dystopia, like it's all happening, man. Like you just got to find people that make it all just feel like a little less overwhelming and to kind of like find humor through the weird, you know? And they're out there.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of the conspiracy is almost like they're so similar, but that idea of like the ostrich with its head in the sand. And it's not that we should just ignore anything that makes us uncomfortable and just like tune out and just like only read like new age blissful content and just like that's harshing my vibe. I don't want to see a poor person like yucky. But it's important to realize that the narratives that are happening around us feed on us, and it's an exchange of energy. Like I read a news article about Trump and Trump becomes more and more of a creation that lives inside of my head and occupies my mental space and is possessed a lot of us. It's really a possession. And I think people are going to look back, whatever people, like people in air quotes, like whatever like transhumanist future beings are going to look back at this era, they're going to look at us the way that we now think of like kind of with horror about like gay sex in the 1970s of like, oh my God, like someone put on a condom, like, what were you guys doing? Like, no, that's not safe. And they're like, oh my God, you guys had social media feeds that you didn't have like a curation app that was running, like that was like coded to be in your favor, that you had like verified like hadn't been tampered with. Like you need to have an ecosystem that protects you from these things, and instead we're just like going around and drinking sewage from open pipes and being like, this is cool, right? Like this is a good idea.
This is fine.
This is fine. Yeah, exactly, this is fine. Yeah, that's the tattoo of this generation.
Yeah, that's the person of the year is that dog in the flames. This is fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Time Magazine's Person of the Year. But that's where we're at. Like, like a meme, like a single image that, like, God, like think about Pepe the Frog and Matt Fury, like it gets away from its creator. So the floodgates are open and these ideas are pouring into our world and into our consciousness in a way where, yeah, I mean, like a meme is probably more relevant as a Person of the Year than fucking Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who the fuck is that now? I don't know where he is.
Yeah.
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 Oh man, Devin, this has been awesome. I love the flow of this whole thing. I can't believe it's already over an hour.
I know. I hope this was uplifting enough. I hope my techno dystopian wizard tear is exactly what everyone needs right
Yeah,
now.
it is. It is because, we need to have more conversations about honesty and holding paradox and the reality of that we are not going back to a normal. Normal never existed. So now
Yeah, normal's gone.
it's gone. So embrace the absurdity that is going to unfold and hold your loved ones near and dear, and remember to put your fucking hands in the dirt and like find your friends because it's only going to get stranger.
For anyone listening that is, feeling scared or upset by this, I'm sorry to tell you, but if you wanted the feel good, positive episode, you got on the wrong timeline because that was the one we recorded yesterday when my internet worked, and so we've branched. So uh,
Yeah.
we're we're on this ride, and I'll end it real quick with just one comment, but my whole thing as a wizard is I talk about this idea of slightly better, because I think so many of these ads and gurus and things promise us the moon. Like, if you do my detox, everything's going to be amazing, and it's probably not. Like, if you're lucky, it'll be slightly better. And so that's kind of my guiding vision of, like, we have this array of choices, and how do we slowly, steadily pick the small choices that lead us in this direction, which is slightly better. And it's hard to have that be your mantra and guiding light when reality feels like it's sliding down this horrible direction. And it keeps getting worse. It keeps being like a fork, and we're like, oh, if we go to the left, maybe we can save things. And we're like, nope, hard right. And I think that magic is the opportunity, though, to realize that the river is so much wider, that it's not these like little streams and we have these forks. There's this so much history and so much weight and so much going on. And that slightly better is us keeping our heads above the water to keep swimming down this river. Like, we're getting into rapids, it's getting excited, it's a bumpy ride, but it's also fucking exciting. Everybody that lived before this era was wondering what was going to happen next. And we're at a time and a place where we're going to see a whole bunch of next, a whole bunch of very unexpected next. And hopefully, it's like a roller coaster. Just buckle up and hope for the best.
Yeah, and enjoy the ride, because
Enjoy the ride.
it's fast, it's fleeting, it's exciting, it's terrifying, and beautiful all at once.
Yep, exactly. The only guarantee in life is that you're probably going to throw up at least a couple times.
Oh, perfect. So perfect way to end it. On this note, can you let everybody know how to keep in touch and learn more? All of the times to plug the Devin person experience.
Come to my house and make out with me. Fuck COVID. Just come and get a sloppy wizard tongue kiss. Um, yeah, the best way to follow me right now, my practice has narrowed considerably this year since I'm not doing live events, but I have a podcast called This Podcast is a Ritual, which is a magic ritual disguised as a podcast that's helping us come together in one of these virtual communities spanning time and space that we've been talking about, and trying to orient us towards a slightly better reality. So if you like wizard zaniness and this resonated with you at all, this podcast is a ritual. You know how to use Google. You can find that. I'm Person is Awake on Instagram and other social media things that I hate that I have to promote, but here I am spewing their little spores out into the ecosystem. And I think it's amazing, like, the power of connection. So, like, send me a message, like DM me, like, reach out. Like, I think it's really cool when these people extend themselves and contact. We're in the void, right? You feel this, Jen. Like, we're just like saying these words and throwing them out there, and it really means a lot when it kind of echoes and comes back and we get to talk to other people. So if you need a wizard for anything at all, like, that's what I'm here for. I purposefully merged myself with an archetype of my dying self to be a wizard. And so I'm here. So holler at your boy. Let's work some magic together.
Amazing. Oh, you're amazing, Devin. Thank you so much. This was so great.
You're amazing. Oh, thank you. This was fun. I'm actually quite confident that something terrible would have happened if we had completed our chat yesterday. And this is the only true conversation we could have really had in this moment.
Agreed. And so it is.
And so mote it be.